"You'll never succeed," he sneered as he shoved the last of his bags into the car, his smirk sharp enough to cut through my chest. I stood there, stunned, holding on to the life we were supposed to build together, only to watch him walk away with it all. He didn't know it yet, but the universe had already started turning in my favor. I'm Amina Holt, 32, and for years, I put my own dreams on hold to help someone else chase his. Malik Rivers, my ex, was the golden boy I believed in. I supported him through grad school, stayed up late helping him perfect presentations, and even set aside my own career plans because we were supposed to be partners, not just in life, but in business. I thought we were building something real together, a construction consultancy that would carry both our names. But Malik had other plans. The night he left, he didn't just walk out of my life. He stole everything. My ideas, my client contacts, my savings, even the hope that I had pinned on us. And the worst part, he did it with that confident, charming grin, acting like I'd never amount to anything without him. "You'll never succeed without me," he said. And then he was gone, leaving me with nothing but an empty apartment and a heart heavier than any concrete beam I'd ever worked with. It hurt, more than I can put into words. I had trusted him, believed in him, and for what? To see him take my work, my vision, and my money and run off with another woman who probably didn't even deserve it. I sat on my couch that night, staring at the blank walls, replaying every single time I had encouraged him, believed in him, sacrificed for him. I felt crushed, invisible, erased. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's not a dead end. It's the start of something else. Something stronger. Something wiser. You see, when the person you trusted most in the world proves you were right to be cautious, the fire that comes from betrayal can either destroy you or forge you into someone unstoppable. And I chose the latter. I won't lie. The first few weeks were the hardest. Sleeping on a tiny couch, eating whatever I could grab, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life by trusting him. But slowly, quietly, I started to pick up the pieces. I realized my value wasn't tied to Malik or his validation, or even the company we had dreamed of together. My value was in me, my skills, my mind, and the fierce determination I had buried beneath the heartbreak. So, if you're ready, I want to take you on this journey with me. The one where betrayal turns into a comeback, and the person who said I'd never succeed ends up watching from the sidelines. Stay with me, because what comes next isn't just about revenge. It's about proving to yourself that no one gets to decide your limits but you. "You'll never succeed without me," Malik said that night, his voice calm, almost casual, as if breaking up with me was just another item on his to-do list. I froze, the words sinking deep, because they weren't just a breakup. They were the final hammer to everything I had built with him. Everything. Let me take you back. Malik and I had started our dream construction consultancy from scratch. We were young, ambitious, and hungry to make our mark in Atlanta. I handled the designs, met with clients, sorted out permits, ran the logistics, basically everything that made the company function. Malik. He smiled at meetings, signed his name on documents, and took all the credit. At first, I told myself it was fine. We were a team. But deep down, I knew my work deserved recognition. Then came the big investor deal, the one that could have launched us into the big leagues. I stayed up nights perfecting the pitch, coordinating the client presentations, making sure every number was precise, every design flawless. Malik didn't lift a finger, at least, not in the way that mattered. And yet, in a move I didn't see coming, he pitched it to the investors as his own vision, presenting himself as the sole founder of the company we built together. I sat quietly in the room, numb, as he smiled and shook hands, acting like he had done everything. That night, I thought we would celebrate the success. Instead, he told me it was over. He broke up with me, saying, with that same smug confidence, "You'll never succeed without me." I felt like someone had ripped the floor from under me. My name was erased from every document, every email, every account tied to the business. My contributions, my sleepless nights, my vision, all gone. I couldn't log in to our shared accounts, couldn't access the client files, couldn't even send a single email in my own voice. I remember sitting on the floor of our empty office, the smell of new paint still lingering, and feeling utterly betrayed. The person I trusted most, the person I loved, had taken my dream and turned it into his alone. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was professionally ruined. Every plan, every effort I had poured into that company vanished in an instant. It wasn't just love that he stole. It was my future, my ambition, and my hope. And yet, even as I sat there staring at the empty office, a small part of me refused to break. The anger, the disbelief, the deep hurt, they all fused into something else: determination. I knew this betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was the cruel push I needed to remind myself what I was capable of. Malik had taken my dream, yes, but he hadn't taken my mind, my skills, or my fire. So, if you're ready to see what happens when someone underestimates a woman fueled by betrayal, stay with me. The road ahead isn't easy, but it's where I start reclaiming everything he thought he could steal, one step at a time. I remember the first night in my tiny one-bedroom apartment like it was yesterday. The boxes were still stacked in the corner, the walls bare, and the silence deafening. After Malik stole everything, I had nothing left but my skills, my stubbornness, and a small savings account that wouldn't last long. I sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted, heart heavy, wondering how I could even start over. But I had to. I couldn't let betrayal define me. I began taking freelance consulting gigs wherever I could find them. Small projects that barely covered the rent, but they kept me moving, kept my mind active, and reminded me that I still had value. Each email I sent, each client call I handled, felt like a small victory. Slowly, I started rebuilding a sense of myself that Malik had tried so hard to erase. One rainy afternoon, I met Elias Grant. He was a retired architect in his 70s, walking into a cafe I frequented for a late lunch. He noticed me sketching designs in my notebook and struck up a conversation. At first, I was hesitant, but there was something about his calm confidence, the way he listened without judgment, that made me open up. I told him a bit about my situation, not the full betrayal, just the part about losing my company, my career, and my confidence. Elias smiled and said something I'll never forget. Don't rebuild what he took. Build better. Those words hit me like a spark lighting dry kindling. I realized I didn't have to compete with Malik. I didn't have to chase what he had stolen. I just had to build something of my own, something stronger, smarter, and better than he ever imagined. That advice became my anchor. With his guidance, I started thinking strategically. I reached out to old contacts, revisited small clients I had helped in the past, and slowly began piecing together a modest portfolio. Every meeting, every pitch, every handshake reminded me that I wasn't powerless. Malik had underestimated me once, but I was about to show him that I could stand on my own, and eventually surpass him. Some nights were long and lonely. I would lie awake, my mind racing with ideas for my new firm, trying to imagine a future that felt far away but possible. There were moments of doubt, but each small success pushed me further. A client here, a recommendation there, a little bit of recognition that I still had the talent to create, design, and manage projects. By the time a few months had passed, I had enough momentum to start imagining my own small firm. Not just as a dream, but as a reality. The fire inside me was growing quietly, steadily, fueled by betrayal but guided by purpose. Malik thought he had broken me, but all he had done was light a fire I would soon use to build my empire. If you want to see how someone can turn heartbreak into power, stick with me, because this is just the beginning. I'm only getting started, and what comes next is where the real comeback begins. I still remember the day I opened the doors to my own firm, Holt Structural Design. The office was small, barely enough space for a desk, a drafting table, and a couple of chairs, but it was mine. I had one client, one dream, and a heart full of determination. After everything Malik had taken from me, this was my chance to prove that I could rise from the ashes and build something real, something lasting, on my own terms. The first few weeks were brutal. I worked late into the nights, sketching designs, meeting clients, and sending proposals. My apartment and office became one, and sleep was a luxury I rarely allowed myself. But slowly, the work started to speak for itself. The designs I poured my soul into began catching attention. Small construction blogs featured my projects, a few local contractors praised the quality of my planning, and word started to spread that Holt Structural Design wasn't just another small firm. It was a company with heart, precision, and integrity. Then came Elias with an opportunity one never expected. He introduced me to Cynthia Ward, a wealthy developer known for spotting raw talent and giving it a chance. She had several properties that needed redevelopment and was searching for fresh, innovative designs. Meeting her was nerve-wracking, but I reminded myself that I had worked too hard to let fear hold me back. Cynthia liked my approach, my attention to detail, and my vision for creating functional yet beautiful structures. She offered me a mid-size contract, enough to put my firm back on the map and show that I was more than capable of handling projects Malik had once claimed would crush me. While I was quietly building my reputation, I started hearing whispers about River's build tech. Malik's company, once praised for rapid success, was now earning a reputation for cutting corners. Clients complained about shoddy work, missed deadlines, and designs that didn't hold up to inspection. It was a small, satisfying reminder that the universe had a way of balancing things out. He had taken my work, my ideas, and my savings, but he couldn't steal my integrity or my talent. Landing that mid-size contract wasn't just a win for Holt Structural Design. It was a personal victory. I realized that I wasn't rebuilding what Malik had destroyed. I was creating something better, stronger, and built on my own terms. Each meeting, each completed project, each positive review felt like a brick in the foundation of my new life. The fire inside me, once fueled by anger and heartbreak, had transformed into a quiet, steady drive for excellence. As I looked around my small office that first evening, drafting plans for a new project, I felt a sense of peace mixed with anticipation. Malik thought he had ended my story, but the truth was that I was only getting started. Holt Structural Design was no longer just a firm. It was my declaration that I could rise, even when everything seemed lost. Stay with me, because what comes next is where our paths collide again, and the real test of strength, patience, and triumph begins. You won't want to miss how fate starts to twist in ways even I couldn't imagine. The first time I saw Malik after a year, I froze for just a second, and then something inside me snapped into focus. It was at a major construction expo in Atlanta, one of those events where everyone from developers to contractors gathers to show off projects and network. I was walking past a display of sleek new materials when I heard that familiar, smug voice. "Amina Holt," he said, flashing that arrogant grin, like he had just done me some huge favor by acknowledging my existence. My stomach twisted, but I held my head high. I had worked too hard to let him see me shaken. He had his perfectly tailored suit, his fancy watch, and the air of someone who thought the world owed him respect. "You're still doing those little projects?" he added, scanning the tiny portfolio I had with me. His tone was dripping with mockery, as if my growth over the past year didn't matter. But I smiled politely and nodded, keeping my calm. There was a strange power in silence, and I could see it flicker in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to look unbothered. He laughed and leaned closer, lowering his voice like he was sharing some secret. "You know, my company just got this huge government project. A $125 million contract. Once-in-a-lifetime deal. Too bad you'll never touch something like that." He puffed up his chest and walked away, leaving a trail of confidence and arrogance behind him. I stood there for a moment, letting it all sink in. Part of me wanted to chase after him, scream, demand answers, but that wasn't me anymore. I had spent a year rebuilding from nothing. I had built my own firm, earned my own clients, and proved that I didn't need him to succeed. The sting of his words was nothing compared to the quiet fire growing inside me. As I wandered through the expo, I noticed people pausing to look at my designs, stopping to ask questions about Holt Structural Design. It was a subtle reminder that I had grown, that I had made a name for myself even when Malik thought I wouldn't. My calm, quiet confidence was unnerving him, and I knew it. He had tried to break me, tried to make me small, but now I carried myself with a strength he couldn't touch. Little did I know, the same $125 million contract Malik bragged about was about to intersect with my own path in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Fate has a strange way of balancing the scales. That day, I walked away from the expo not with fear or doubt, but with anticipation. Something was coming, and this time, it would be on my terms. Stay with me, because the twists ahead aren't just coincidence. They're the start of a comeback Malik never saw coming. You'll see how the universe begins to tip in ways even I hadn't expected. I never expected a phone call to change everything, but that morning, it did. Cynthia Ward, the developer Elias had introduced me to, was on the line with a voice full of excitement. "Amina, we need your expertise on a government infrastructure project," she said. "It's a huge opportunity, $125 million. Are you interested?" My heart skipped. I knew it was big, but I had no idea just how much this would shift the entire game. I agreed immediately. I couldn't resist the challenge, and honestly, I wanted the chance to prove myself on a project that mattered. I dived into the details, reviewing plans, designs, and specifications. Every drawing, every calculation, every client note, This was my kind of work, and it reminded me why I had loved building from scratch in the first place. I was focused, determined, and unaware that fate had a little surprise waiting for me. A few days into the consultation, during a routine review of the submitted bids, something caught my eye. Rivers Build Tech, Malik's company, had submitted design plans that looked familiar. Too familiar. My stomach sank as I compared them to old drafts I had created during our partnership, the ones Malik had stolen. He had submitted my work as his own, trying to pass it off as original. The audacity of it made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. There was no need for confrontation, no dramatic scene, just quiet, calculated action. I pulled out my original files, time-stamped and saved from when I had worked on them. Every note, every calculation, every sketch proved ownership. I sent the evidence to the board overseeing the project, detailing the plagiarism without adding my own anger or commentary. I let the proof speak for itself. The next day, the board reviewed the files and immediately canceled Rivers Build Tech's bid. They reopened the contract for ethical contenders, ensuring the project would go to someone who respected originality and integrity. I sat back at my small office desk, feeling a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. It wasn't revenge in the loud, dramatic sense. It was justice served quietly, professionally, and perfectly. Malik thought he could cheat, steal, and manipulate his way to a massive contract, and he had underestimated me again. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very project he had bragged about at the expo was now under review because of his own dishonesty, and I was in a position to step in ethically and claim it fairly. It was a turning point. One phone call, one project, and suddenly, the board's attention was on Holt Structural Design. My firm, my work, my integrity, it was all being recognized. The fire that had been growing inside me for months, fueled by betrayal and determination, was ready to transform into something unstoppable. Stay with me, because what comes next isn't just about winning a contract. It's about watching the universe tip in my favor in the most satisfying way, and seeing how the tables finally turn on someone who thought he was untouchable. The phone rang early the next morning, and when I saw Cynthia Ward's name flashing on the screen, I knew it was important. My heart was already racing from the day before, but I had no idea just how much this call would change everything. "Amina," she said, her voice calm but excited, "Holt Structural Design has been chosen to lead the government infrastructure project. The $125 million contract is officially yours." I felt a strange mix of shock and disbelief. I sank into my chair for a moment, my mind racing. That number, the same $125 million Malik had bragged about at the expo, was now officially in my hands. The realization hit me slowly, like the quiet turning of a tide. Fate had a sense of humor, and it was playing out perfectly. I didn't rush to celebrate. I took a deep breath and allowed myself a few moments to absorb what had happened. Months of late nights, endless effort, and quiet persistence had led to this moment. Malik had taken my ideas, my dream, and my trust, but now the very project he thought would define him was mine to lead. It was poetic justice, and yet the satisfaction was subtle, almost bittersweet. The next morning, I walked into the office, my steps steady but heart pounding. The sunlight hit the polished floor as I reached my desk, and there it was, the contract neatly placed waiting. I froze for just a moment, staring at the crisp paper with the official stamps, knowing exactly what it represented. Every plan, every design, every late night had led to this. It wasn't about gloating or rubbing Malik's face in his failure. It was about showing the world and myself that I could rise above betrayal and succeed on my own terms. I sat down, carefully opening the pages of the contract. Each section confirmed what Cynthia had said the night before. Holt Structural Design would lead the project. My firm, my vision, and my integrity would finally get the recognition it deserved. I could almost feel Malik's arrogance crumbling somewhere in the distance, though I didn't allow myself to think about him. This wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was proof that talent, hard work, and honesty always prevail. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle over me. Months ago, I had been heartbroken, betrayed, and left with nothing. Now, I held a $125 million project in my hands, a symbol of my resilience and determination. The fire inside me, once fueled by anger and despair, had transformed into quiet strength, focus, and confidence. I didn't shout, I didn't gloat, and I didn't call anyone to celebrate just yet. Instead, I allowed myself to feel the victory in silence, savoring the twist of fate that had brought Malik's bragged-about dream into my reality. I knew the real test was still ahead, delivering the project, proving my worth, and showing that Holt's structural design was more than a firm. It was a force built from perseverance, talent, and integrity. Stay with me, because this is only the beginning. The project may be mine, but the story of what comes next, the challenges, the triumphs, and the final closure, is where the real journey unfolds. The news came slowly at first, in whispers and online headlines, but soon it was everywhere. Malik's company, Rivers Build Tech, was collapsing. Investors were pulling out one by one, leaving empty accounts and unpaid bills in their wake. The arrogance and shortcuts he had taken finally caught up with him, and the empire he had built on lies and stolen ideas was crumbling overnight. I watched from my office as the world seemed to turn against him, and I didn't feel the rush of triumph I thought I would. Instead, there was a quiet sense of relief, a confirmation that integrity matters more than charm or deceit. Malik had spent years building a persona of success, but without honesty and hard work, it all came tumbling down. The man who once sneered at me now faced the consequences of his own actions. Even more satisfying, though sad in its way, was the personal fallout. His new girlfriend, the one who had glided in at the perfect time, left as soon as the money dried up. I heard about it through mutual contacts, and while part of me felt a little amused, I mostly felt indifferent. I had moved on, built something real, and the chaos surrounding him no longer had the power to touch my life. Then, one late afternoon, there was a knock on my office door. I looked up to see Malik standing there, his suit wrinkled, his usual confident grin gone, replaced by something closer to desperation. He stepped inside, hesitated, and then blurted out, "Amina, I need your help. Can you forgive me? Can I at least work with you? Please, I'll do anything." I studied him silently, my heart steady. For a moment, I felt the old anger flicker, but I didn't give it power. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming control over my life. Malik had underestimated me once, and now he was at my mercy, though I had no intention of playing games. "You once said I'd never succeed," I said calmly, meeting his eyes. "And you were right, just not your way." My voice was quiet, controlled, but every word carried the weight of all I had endured and achieved. He stared at me, searching for some reaction, some hint of humiliation or anger. I gave him none. I stood, letting him take in the reality of his downfall. Then I gestured toward the door. He nodded slowly, understanding that there was nothing left for him here. No begging, no pleading, no reconciliation. Just the quiet power of someone who had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. As he walked out, I didn't feel gloating or satisfaction in a petty sense. I felt closure. Malik's downfall wasn't my victory. It was the universe restoring balance. And I had grown beyond needing to prove myself to him. I was no longer the person he could hurt, manipulate, or underestimate. Stay with me, because even though the storm around Malik has passed, the next chapter isn't about him. It's about what I do with the power, respect, and opportunity I've earned, and the life I'm building for myself and others. Sitting in my office one quiet afternoon, I realized something surprising. Malik's downfall didn't bring me joy. Not the kind I had imagined in those sleepless nights fueled by anger. Instead, there was a deep, quiet relief, like finally exhaling after holding my breath for too long. The weight of betrayal had lifted, and for the first time in years, I could feel space in my life for something new, something better. I started thinking about all the young women I had met over the years, talented, ambitious, and overlooked. Many of them reminded me of myself when I had first started, full of potential, but underestimated because of who they were or where they came from. I realized that my next step wasn't just about building my own success. It was about lifting others as I climbed. I began mentoring young Black women in architecture and construction, sharing knowledge, opening doors, and encouraging them to believe in themselves even when the world doubted them. Watching them grow, taking on projects, and gaining confidence was more satisfying than any contract, any recognition, or even the poetic justice I had experienced with Malik. I saw myself in them, and in guiding them, I felt my own wounds start to heal. The anger that had fueled me for so long softened, replaced by a sense of purpose. I wasn't just reclaiming my life. I was creating something lasting that would touch more than just my own world. One afternoon, Elias dropped by the office, as he often did, just to check in. He looked around at the small but growing team, the designs pinned up on the walls, and the energy of people learning and thriving. He smiled at me, a quiet, knowing smile. "Amina," he said, "you didn't just win. You evolved." His words struck me, and I realized he was right. I hadn't needed revenge to feel whole. I hadn't needed Malik's failure to define my worth. What mattered was the person I had become. The mentor, the leader, the woman who had turned heartbreak into purpose. I spent more time reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The sleepless nights, the stolen dreams, the betrayal that had felt like it would break me. It all led to this moment of clarity. I understood that success wasn't just a contract or a title or a number in a bank account. Success was the ability to stand tall after being knocked down, to create value not just for yourself, but for others, and to carry yourself with integrity, no matter how tempting shortcuts might seem. As I watched my mentor tackle challenges, pitch designs, and walk confidently into spaces that once seemed closed to them, I felt an inner peace I hadn't thought possible. The story of betrayal, loss, and revenge had shifted into a story of growth, empowerment, and real achievement. And I finally understood that the quietest victories, the ones that heal, inspire, and build something meaningful, are the ones that last the longest. Stay with me, because the next chapter isn't about the past or the betrayal anymore. It's about how I, and those I lift, continue to grow, thrive, and leave a mark on the world that no one can take away. The day the $125 million project finally broke ground, I stood back and watched the machines rumble to life, the workers moving with purpose, and the first concrete being poured. Months of planning, sleepless nights, and quiet determination had led to this moment. Holt Structural Design's name was on every sign, every banner, every document. It felt surreal and grounding all at once. Reporters had gathered, cameras flashing, microphones ready, and they wanted sound bites, excitement, and a story of triumph. One of them asked me, almost eagerly, "Amina, now that you've reached this level, what does success feel like?" I paused, looking out over the construction site. For a moment, I let myself take it all in, the culmination of work, persistence, and resilience. Then I smiled slightly and said, "It feels like peace." Peace. That one word carried years of emotion, heartbreak, struggle, and growth. It wasn't the thrill of revenge, the excitement of a big contract, or even the vindication of seeing Malik's downfall. It was something deeper, quieter, and infinitely more satisfying. It was knowing I had stayed true to myself, built something with integrity, and never lost sight of who I was, even when the world tried to convince me I wouldn't succeed. As the reporters moved on, asking more questions about project specifics and timelines, I reflected quietly on the journey that had brought me here. Malik's words, "You'll never succeed," echoed in my mind, but not as a taunt. Instead, they reminded me how far I had come. I realized that sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong or winning their approval. Sometimes it's about never needing to prove you were right. It's about living your life fully with integrity, purpose, and the knowledge that you've done your best. Looking around the site, seeing my team working, confident and inspired, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment that went beyond any contract or headline. Holt Structural Design wasn't just my firm anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, creativity, and mentorship. I had built something lasting, something that could lift others as I had been lifted, and that was the real reward. I thought about all the young women I had mentored, the clients who trusted me, and the lessons I had learned along the way. The betrayal, heartbreak, and quiet fury that once defined me had evolved into clarity, focus, and purpose. The project breaking ground wasn't just a milestone for my firm. It was a milestone for me as a person. Standing there, the sunlight glinting off the steel beams, I whispered to myself, almost like a mantra. He said I'd never succeed. But sometimes success isn't winning. It's never needing to prove you were right. And in that moment, I felt complete. Stay with me, because this story isn't just about one project, one betrayal, or one comeback. It's about the journey from hurt to healing, from anger to empowerment, and from doubt to peace. And sometimes, that's the greatest success of all. What do you think? Did Amina handle everything the right way, or should she have confronted Malik differently? I'm curious to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and share your take. And if you love following stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new one.